This is the deepest Team Canada we have ever seen. I don't think that's an exaggeration. I really don't. This is hands down the deepest version of Team Canada men's volleyball we have ever seen. And it may also be the best Team Canada we have ever seen. I mean, that remains to be seen. There's a lot of good teams in the past, but what we've got right now for the Maple Volleys in 2026 is outstanding. But before we jump into 2026, I do want to go back to 2025 and explain why I think that 2025 was actually one of the biggest years for the Canadian men's national team program as a whole. Since the Canadian men's national team has joined the World League all the way back in 2012, the Maple Volleys have always really leaned on their best players year in and year out. And I mean, they had to, right? The depth just wasn't there to not have the best players playing at all times. And so I know you're thinking, Everett, Canada went 5-7 last year in the VNL. They finished 13th last year in the VNL. How can you say that last year was one of the biggest years and most important? Well, I want to take you back to 2022. It was the year after the Tokyo Olympics, and the majority of the OG Maple Volleys have retired. Gord Perrin, Graham Viagrass, Show wasn't on that team, Stephen Marshall, Blair Band, Dan Jansen Van Dorn, like the list goes on and on. There was a complete turnaround of that team, and Canada at the VNL in 2022 went 2-8, and then in 2023 they went 3-9. So heading into the 2025 season, I was a little worried. Right, there was no Stephen Marr, no Eric Lepke, no Arthur Schwartz, no Denny Demyanenko, four guys who had been huge in Canada's qualification to a third Olympic Games in Paris in 2024. So why 2025 was so important is it just really saw the culmination or the coming of age of a program that can now compete at the highest level internationally, can, make it out of a pool play situation like they did last year, beating Japan without its best players, right? Without the top players in the world that Canada can provide. Now, Canada went 5-7 last year at the VNL. However, they were just one win away from qualifying for the finals. Canada was 5-7 in 13th place with 17 points. Cuba, who qualified for the finals, were 6-6 in 7th place with 20 points. Now, that was a big difference. If Canada had been able to get one more win, whether it was against the US or against Serbia in the third week, if Canada had been able to win 3-0, they would have got 6-6, tied Cuba. They had 20 points and tied Cuba, and they would have had a better set ratio wins to losses. Cuba won 28 sets, lost 26, and Canada, with the 5-7 record, won 23 and lost 24. So had we won, 3-0 or 3-1 even, we would have won 26 sets and lost, 21 or 22, giving us a better set ratio than Cuba, and we would have gone to the finals. And that is massive given the young team that Canada had out there last year, right? When you're looking at 2024 Olympians, there was really only Finn McCarthy, there was Landon Curry, there was Luke Herr, Justin Louis, right? Those guys that we relied on were no longer there, and this was a much younger team, and I thought we were going to see shades of 2022. But instead, it was just the years and years of buildup for this Canadian national team. And in reality, Dan Lewis was the perfect guy to lead this new era of Canadian volleyball because he had been the setup guy from 2022 through to 2024 as the B team head coach. Right, the B team at the Pan Am Cup made 3 straight finals over that course, winning twice in a row, which was never done before that by Team Canada. And then he follows it up in 2025 by getting a better record than teams that had guys like Stephen Marr and Arthur Schwartz and Eric Lepke. So to me, it just really shows the development pathway that Volleyball Canada has created. The pipeline, the system, and the depth has really come to fruition. And last year, there were plenty of guys who could have got minutes who didn't just because there was too many guys to choose from on the roster. Now, last year was a big discovery year for Team Canada men's volleyball, but this year is a winning year with an Olympic bid on the line in Moncton in September. The stars are back to play, baby. And I'm not kidding when I say that this is hands down the deepest Canadian roster ever. And there is competition in literally every single position. So when we go and look at the wide roster for this Team Canada. Just going to go down the list real quick. On the outside, Eric Lepke is back this year. Skylar Varga, Jackson Young, Owen Weeks out of Manitoba. He's heading to Long Beach next year. Caden Schmidt, just coming off another fantastic championship season with Trinity Western. Stephen Marr is back for the Maple Volleys. Brody Hofer and Eric Siskna. Down the middle, you have Jackson Howe. Danya Demyanenko is back. Pierce Ashenko. Kofi is back as well. Cody Hudson, new to the roster out of MRU. Trent Cherawati, also new to the roster out of Alberta. And then Cole Duncanson, who has bounced around a little bit, started at Queens and then bounced around the States a little bit and played in Czechia this year. In the setting position, you have Max Elgert, Mason Greaves coming off a Player of the Year season in U Sports, Luke Herr, JJ Love, and Jonathan Portalance. On the right side, you have Shawan Vernon Evans coming back for his first VNL since 2021. Arthur Schwartz is back on the roster after taking a year off last year. Xander Ketrazinski, Jordan Canham, and Daniil Hrstanovic, who's been playing at Long Beach as well. And then finally, in the libero position, you have Landon Curry, Darian Picklick, Zach Holland, and Quinton Greenridge on his first time on the roster, coming off a NCAA national championship with Hawaii. Now, like the other teams I've done before jumping into the actual roster, and I mean, if you're watching this, you know the tournament's already started. I apologize. I've recorded this twice already. Something's happening with my editing software that I use, and it won't show up in it and won't actually process. So I'm having to record this again after they've already played their first match. Before we jump into kind of who's on this team, let's talk about who's not there. First and foremost, Finn McCarthy, captain from last year, is not on this VNL roster. For him, he just became a dad. He's played over the summer for the past 9 years, has had a couple of long professional seasons, especially playing for Lublin this year. You know, they played Champions League. They went all the way to the finals once again in the Plus Liga. And Finn just needs a little bit of time off to learn to be a dad. He will be back for Team Canada in September for the NORCECA Championships. Next up, we have Isaac Heslinga. And now I'll be honest, I'm a little confused about this because what I was hearing from some pretty reliable sources was that Heslinga had actually decided to quit and retire from volleyball. He had a bit of a rough year this year in Tours, not to any of his own doing. They had a weird year where their coach quit at the beginning of the season. He was a starter for them. He helped them win the French Cup. And then a new coach came in, kind of played some favorites, and Heslinga had to battle a little bit more for a spot. And it was just a weird year in general in Tours completely. But as of recent, Heslinga has been announced that he will be joining Norwich Czestochowa in the Plus Liga next year. And honestly, it may be one of those situations where, you know, he could just found a contract that is just too good to be true and has continued playing. As he said in an interview with the Plus Liga, playing the Plus Liga is one of my goals. So when Norwich Czestochowa contacted me, I didn't have to think twice. But unfortunately, he is not on the roster this year. Hoping to see him back in Maple Volley's colors in the future sometime. Next up, we have the last remaining OG Maple Volley himself, Nick Hogue. And Hogue was on the roster last year. He just got engaged to former Team USA women's volleyball setter Lauren Carlini. And, you know, I'm not entirely sure if he's taking the summer off, but unfortunately, Nick's career has gotten to the point where he's kind of mostly playing in the Middle East as of late, playing in Qatar last year, playing in the UAE this year. And I wouldn't be surprised if it might be the end of the line for Nick Hogue, unfortunately. I mean, I've always been a big fan of Nick Hogue. We grew up in the same age class, got to see him play back when he was playing for the Volontaires at the Cégep de Sherbrooke, and, you know, all on his way up. But with the amount of talent and young talent that's on the roster right now, I just don't know if there's any room for the last remaining OG Maple Volley, which is a little sad and also makes me feel really old. Next up, we have outside hitter Jonas van Huizen. Now, he actually wasn't on the national team last year. He was part of the B team, but he had a massive year in Friedrichshafen in the Bundesliga. He was really supposed to start in the Czech league, but because Jackson Young got signed late in the summer to Lublin, there was a spot open on Friedrichshafen. Jonas van Huizen got called up and he had a monster year for Friedrichshafen, leading them to a top 4 finish. Now, when I was in the Gatineau gym last year, I had some people tell me that they thought he hit harder than Jordan Canham. And if anyone knows how hard Jordan Canham hits, and remember it was my videos from the Canham back in 2019, him destroying my camera, which actually never got fixed. It was irreplaceable. You'll know just how hard that reference is. Unfortunately, hitting hard does lead to some problems, as he did have to get shoulder surgery at the end of the year. And now we're wishing him a speedy recovery. And he's signed to go play for Friedrichshafen once again next year. And then finally, we have Justin Louis. He's been a member of this team since 2022 as well. It is very, very hard to be a North American libero in professional volleyball. Not only are you one of the least paid players, I mean, anyone who follows Eric Shoji will know about that, but a lot of countries aren't going to be willing to use a foreigner spot on a libero unless you're the elite of the elite. And, considering he's had some injuries over the past few years, I'm just not sure if he is going to be continuing. I did reach out, didn't hear back from him. So, Justin, if you're watching this, I hope you're doing well, buddy. But looking at who is on the roster this year, and of course, as we know, this tournament has already started, and this is the 18 who are competing for Canada in Ottawa this week. So I'll just go down the list real quick. On the outside, Eric Lepke, Jackson Young, Skylar Vardka, Stephen Marr, Brody Hofer, and Eric Sixna. Next up, down the middle, we have Jackson Howe, Danny Demyanenko, Kofi, and Pierre Sashenko. On the right side, all three studs are there: Shawan Vernon Evans, Xander Ketrazinski, and Arthur Schwartz. In the setting position, we have Max Elgert, Luke Herr, and Mason Greaves. And then finally, in the libero positions, you have Landon Curry and Zach Hollins rounding out the roster. Now, one thing with a roster this deep is that it gives you a lot of room to play with. So there's 18 on the roster this week. They're playing in Ottawa. It's right beside the center in Gatineau. You can have a full complement. I would not be surprised, and I'm actually hearing that things are probably going to change for weeks 2 and 3. There's probably going to be some guys, especially some of the dads on the team. I mean, going back to Finn McCarthy, and if you watch my interview last year with Dan Lewis before he took over the team, there's a big emphasis on letting those guys who maybe need a little bit of time off to take some time off. So guys who are fathers, like a Stephen Marr, like an Eric Lepke, like a Danny Demyanenko, these are probably guys who we may not see over the course of the entirety of the VNL. And that's all right, because we have the depth. Now we're going to break down these 18 by position group, starting off with none other than Stephen Marr. And yes, I know he announced his retirement in the fall of 2024, and everyone thought that would be the end of him. But, when I talked to Marr over the past year or so, just casually, I definitely got the sense that he would be open to coming back and might even want to come back. But this is a guy who went through 5 different coaching changes over the course of his time with the Maple Vol. It's actually now 6 that he's playing under Dan Lewis. And Dan Lewis is a guy who he played with back when he was first coming into the program, and Dan was still one of the liberos. And Marr is an emotional guy in the best way. And you know that he shouldered a lot of pressure and a lot of the weight of the team over the course of those difficult years in 2022 and 2023. And, I just got the sense, and basically from what he told me, is that it was a big toll on him to be that guy all the time. And now I think one of the big reasons he wanted to come back is twofold. A, he doesn't have to be that guy anymore. Lepke's career has come along fantastically. And there's all of that depth. He doesn't have to shoulder the load and be that guy at all times. But then second of all, Dan Lewis, with that flexibility, with allowing dads to be dads and allow guys to take that time off, just puts him in a position where he doesn't have to be the guy all the time and doesn't have to go on every single trip. Having Marr back is absolutely huge. I mean, he just had another monster year playing in Turkey for Galatasaray, where he was one of their top scorers. Once again, I mean, this is a guy who scored over 400 points, averaged 4.27 points per set. And he was overall 14th in league scoring in the Turkish Efeler Ligi. And he was also top 10 in scoring in the Champions League as well. And I mean, we know Marr, he can do it all. He passes well, he hits well, he serves well. And when he's on his game, he can be one of the best in the world. Now, alongside him, you got the Monza Bros back together. Eric Lepke coming off his 3rd straight trip to the Lega Volley finals. I mean, only Canadian to ever do that. Actually, he's the only player in the Lega Volley at the moment who has gone to 3 straight finals. And he had another big year for Lubi Civitanova, albeit playing mostly in a right side position. He's kind of receiving, but also playing in the opposite position in the 3 outside hitter system that Lube plays. Lepke has continued to be elite in Italy. He was 20th in league scoring this year, averaging 3.33 points per set. And that's natural when you're playing with a guy like Alex Nikolov. He was also the 15th best server this year in the Lega volley with 28 aces, averaging 0.37 aces per set. But most importantly, what I think is big when looking at Lepke is his hitting numbers. He hit a 51% this year with a 46% efficiency. Absolutely massive. So having Lepke back and Mar back is absolute chef's kiss. And honestly, it's up there with some of the best outside duos in the world. Next, we have Brody Hofer, a guy who was one of the top scorers last year for Canada at the VNL, of course, coming in out of Trinity Western University. And he started his year in Turkey playing for Halkbank, but Halkbank was a little loaded and they didn't really make any substitutions at all. When you've got Yoandy Leal, Matej Kaczynski, and Alexander Śliwka on a team, you're not going to get that much playing time. So halfway through the year, he did transfer to Alanya to play still in the Turkish league, and he did pretty well for them, scoring 142 points over the course of, basically the end of the season, popping off more specifically for 25 points against Ziraatbank, the best team in Turkey this year. And he hit 59% with a 56% efficiency, going 19 for 32 overall, which is pretty gross. Once again, Brody Hofer is an absolute big banger, and I'm sure he's going to be getting some starting minutes this year, but also I'm expecting to see him come in off the bench also as a serving sub, much like he did back in 2023 and 2024. Next, we have one of the biggest surprises last year in 2025, Jackson Young. Now, Jackson, coming out of Nipissing University, the first men's national team player from Nipissing University up in North Bay. He also another Pac-Man Volleyball Club guy. Now, Jackson started 2025 on the B team and impressed so much that he was actually moved up to the A team and then really worked his way in and impressed a lot of people over the course of the VNL last year. And now Jackson, as I mentioned earlier, was supposed to start the season with Friedrichshafen, then got picked up right at the beginning of the season to go play for Lublin. And I mean, Lublin, one of the best teams in the world this year. They went to the Plus Liga finals. They won the Polish Cup. They were in the Champions League as well. And Jackson did get quite a bit of playing time, both coming in off the bench as a starter role, opposite of Wilfredo Leon. So talk about pressure. And I thought Jackson, considering everything, all the pressure and the team he was playing for this year, did really, really well. He had a solid season this year, averaging just over 2 points per set, hitting pretty good. He hit a 42%, only a 23% efficiency. So you'd like to see that bumped up. And passing was all right, 38% positive and 15% perfect. To me, he just brought a lot of juice to that team. He started for them in the Plus Liga finals as well. And he was really good defensively. He really just came in and was solid for this team whenever they needed him. And I think that is a massive experience for Jackson to get minutes with one of the best teams in the world in one of the best leagues in the world. Now, next is a guy, if you're a fan of the Maple Volleys, you may not know as well, especially if you're out on the West Coast and you don't care at all about the OUA, but Eric Siskna is a guy who I think is going to get some minutes. I honestly think Siskna is going to play quite a bit. He spent the past 2 years playing for Canuck Roselaire in the Belgian league, and if you know anything about that club, that is a club that developed some really, really good talent. Like guys like Ferry Regers is coming out of the club. Like the entire Belgium team that beat Bulgaria already is coming out of Roselaire. And Siskna was a stud for them. He came out of Queen's University. And if anyone remembers what he did at the U Sports National Championships back in 2024, he is the real deal. Now, he was on the B team last year, but I mean, this is a guy who is 6'5". He's physical. He knows how to score. And I mean, when we're looking at the Champions League this past year, Siskna was solid playing for Canuck Roselaire, averaging 3.14 points per set with 91 points overall. And once again, he was the second option on his team offensively because the top scorer in the Champions League over the fourth round was Basil Dermot. And, he was getting the most volume. But where Cisna, I think, is going to really help Team Canada is the fact that over the course of the Champions League, he was the second best receiver in the fourth round, behind only Kyle D'Agostino of Berlin, with over 36% perfect receptions and 148 perfect receptions. So that is massive, especially because Canuck Roselaire was playing in the pool of death, and they made it out of the pool of death alongside Lublin, Galatasaray, and Halkbank. So a Polish team and two Turkish teams. That's a big ask, and Cisna was up to the task time and time again. I think he's going to be a really good addition to this roster. Finally, we have Skylar Varga, who finished up his career at Long Beach. And I mean, without Moni, it was a little bit more difficult, but he still had a solid season for Long Beach, averaging well over 4 points a set this season and hitting a 320. So that is the outside core for Team Canada this year. And honestly, I think all 6 of those guys can step in and take some minutes. And I think that is absolutely huge. Next up, we have Danny Demyanenko. And Demyanenko, formerly from McMaster's, another guy who took off 2025 to become a father. And he had what can only be called a career year in Plusliga, where he was hands down one of the best middles in the league. He was 3rd overall in blocks this year with 70 stuff blocks, averaging 0.59 blocks per set. But his 306 points this year was 2nd amongst all middle blockers in the Plusliga this season, which is absolutely massive. Danny is a little bit undersized, but he's quick and he is an offensive weapon. He was one of Marciniano's favorite toys this year for Resovia. Now, if you know anything about Demyanenko, this dude is a consummate professional. He is such a hard worker, and he is going to be the anchor for this team, especially with Finn McCarthy taking the VNL off. And now, alongside Danny, I'm expecting a couple of guys, most notably Danny Gima, otherwise known as Kofi. Now, he was also playing for Lublin this year alongside Finn McCarthy and Jackson Young. And while he didn't get that much playing time, he was playing behind McCarthy and Alex Grozanov, one of the best middles in the world from Bulgaria. He also suffered a thumb injury throughout this year. He is signed to go back to Lublin next year. And even though he didn't play that much, he still averaged, over a point per set coming in off the bench with 74 points in 66 sets. He also hit 62% with a 52% efficiency. Actually, I'm just going to go back to Demyanenko real quick, because he hit a 68% with a 58% efficiency. Huge. He only made 7 errors this year. Only made 7 hitting errors all year in the Plusliga. Honestly, I think he made about half that last night in the first few sets against Germany. So he's getting them out of his system. But back to Kofi. I mean, Kofi is one of the most clippable players in volleyball. Everyone knows who he is. He is one of the highest spike touches in the world. He's one of the most dynamic and athletic players in the world. And I'm really excited to see what he can do now that he's slated to potentially get some starting minutes for Team Canada. Rounding things out in the middle is going to be Jackson Howe. Now, Howe, well known to Canadian fans, another one of the most athletically gifted and offensively minded players in Canada, and also just in the game as a whole. He is a clip machine, both for Trinity Western and this past year for Lüneburg in the Bundesliga. And he helped Lüneburg win their first ever German Cup, go all the way to the Bundesliga finals. They also played in Champions League. While it is pretty difficult to find stats from the Bundesliga, and if you know how to find stats from the Bundesliga, please let me know. When the DIN Volleyball or the Spontank guys did their votes for All-Stars, many of them voted Jackson Howe as All-Stars this year in the Bundesliga because he was absolutely dominant. And then closing out the roster in the middle will be Piers Schenko. He played this past season for Poitiers in the French League underneath Dan Lewis. And now, bit of a tough position. He was coming in off the bench behind Magnin and Lucas Massa. Both of them were top 10 blockers in the LNV. Magnin is playing for the French national team right now. Lucas Massa is a member of the German national team as well. But, he's a little bit more physical. And just by physical, I mean he's a little bit taller and, bigger than some of the other guys we have, like Howe and Kofi. Both of them jump really high. Pierce is just a little bit bigger. So he's going to round out that roster, probably more in a bit of a blocking role. Moving over to the opposite position, I think this is going to be the most interesting position for Team Canada because you have 3 guys who are really going to be battling for the spot, right? 3 guys who have led this team at a certain point, right? Shawan went to the Olympics back in 2021, Arthur Schwartz was one of the guys for us, leading us to the Olympics in 2024. And then Xander Ketrzynski was the go-to for Team Canada in 2025. And all of them are high-volume guys who are very physical and know how to score. Now, starting with Siobhan, first time he's going to be back at the VNL since 2021, and you absolutely love to see Siobhan Vernon-Evans in the red and white of Team Canada. He rejoined the team last year for the World Championships, and you just love to see it. There was a point when he was one of the biggest prospects in the world. And while that may not still be the case, this is a guy who can still be absolutely elite. And he spent the past number of years dominating the Japanese league, where he was a consistent top 5 scorer. And this past year, he was playing in Korea, where he dominated once again, led the league in scoring with 862 points, averaging 6.2 points per set. He was also the second best server in the league with 59 aces, averaging 0.424 aces per set as well. Now, I do think Siobhan is going to be the starter. However, I think both of the other guys are going to get their licks as well. Next, we're looking at Xander Ketrzynski. Now, Xander was another one of the go-to guys for Canada last year, and now he's bounced around a little bit over the course of his career. This past year playing for Caen in the French league. And while Caen did not have a great year, Xander did. He was 5th in the league in scoring with 532 points, and he will also be headed to play in Korea next year. And now I know Xander is maybe the least proven of the three, but I honestly think he has a very good shot of making this team. Xander is a guy who every time I have certain expectations for him, he always seems to surpass them. And I wouldn't be surprised if he was able to do it again. He's big, he's physical, he comes from a volleyball family. His brothers played at quite a high level as well. His one brother, Cole, plays professionally. Trent is great on the beach. Their dad represented Canada at the 84 Olympics as well. Shout out to Alex. So I'm really excited to see Xander back in the Team Canada jersey. And I mean, if you watch what he did last night against Germany, you understand why. He is a physical specimen and he's got shots. Rounding out the roster is Arthur Schwartz. And I think Schwartz is going to come in hungry this year. He took the 2025 season off, which was very well deserved. And this past year was signed for Olsztyn. And unfortunately, he did find himself stuck on the bench for Olsztyn behind everyone's favorite Jan Hadrava. And while he was featured in pretty much every single match because they loved running that double sub, when he was in, he was actually doing pretty well, scoring quite a bit. Now, because of the double sub situation, he was only really averaging under 2 points per set. But when he was swinging, he hit a 57% with a 40% efficiency. And given that this is a guy who was one of the best scorers in Italy the season before for Monza, we know that Schwartz can go out there and score a ton, and I think he's going to be hungry to be able to prove that with the Maple Volleys over the course of this VNL. Honestly, I think this is going to be the toughest decision for Dan Lewis this year. You've got 3 guys who have a claim and have a reason to want to be the guy on the right side for Team Canada, and realistically, you can kind of only pick 2. Coming into the setter position, last year, coming into the season, I thought, one of the most solid positions that we had would have been setting. Luke Herr helped Canada get to the Olympics in 2024, right? He was a guy who played for Lewis on the B team back in 2022, who started for Lewis back then. And I thought he was an absolute block. However, I was really impressed by what Max Elger did last year when he stepped in, whether it was off the bench or when he started for the Maple Volleys. Now, Herr played this year in Greece for Alan's Milan. This was a team that ended up finishing 3rd, and Herr was a big part of that. They were one of the best teams in the league throughout the regular season and then just barely lost out in the semifinals. Elger this year played in France for Plessis Robinson. And I mean, Elger went in and helped this team make the playoffs for the first time in their history. And from what I'm hearing from the people who watch him quite a bit in France, a lot of it was due to how he ran that offense. And I do think that these guys approach the game in a little bit of a different manner. Obviously, Herr is a little bit older, a little bit more experienced. He's been to the Olympics. He's been to the World Championships. He's done it all. Herr sets a really hittable ball, right? Hitters love hitting off of him because he just sets absolute pillows, and dudes just love crushing it. Whereas Elgert can sling an offense. He can get those ISOs, and he's a really, really smart setter. So I think with either guy, you're going to have some advantages when they come in. Now, Greaves is on this roster as well. I've never really seen him set for Team Canada, and he's mostly been used in a, serving sub role. Finally, rounding out the liberos on the roster, I think Landon Curry has one of the safest spots right now on Team Canada. He won that role over the past couple of seasons. I thought he's just been a workhorse and super solid for Canada, especially in serve receive. But this year, he went at a really big year in the best league in the world, in Italy. He's the first Canadian libero to play in Italy. And he backed it up. He went out there and was one of the best passers in the league. He was 7th in perfect passes this year for Cisterna. And now Cisterna wasn't a great team. And Curry was able to step in with some of the best servers in the world and what I think is the best serving league in the world and really show up. So I think he's going to be a huge piece to Team Canada this year. And rounding out the roster is Zach Hollins out of Sherbrooke. And now Mr. Hollins played this year for Poitiers and Dan Lewis in France. And while for Poitiers, he is an outside, he did suit up a little bit as a libero, but he's mostly an outside. I like him. I loved Justin Louis as well. I'm a big fan of Darian Picklick. It's really hard to pick between them, but I love Holland's work ethic. He's a guy who's going to be able to really help this team in practice, and he's still going to be able to come in off the bench when needed as well. Now, as I said, I think this is hands down the deepest Team Canada, and I mean, I just explained why. You've got a number of guys in every single positions making impacts in big leagues, and you love to see it. You just love to see the maturation and the growth of the pipeline and the system that Glenn Hogue and then Dan Lewis and everyone else involved have built over the years. And remember, this is a team who last year went 5-7, were one match away from heading to the playoffs. And with the addition of Lepke, of Marr, of Demyanenko, of Shawan, of Schwartz, you have to think that this team is in a really good position to go to the playoffs. However, let's remember, the goal of this year is to qualify for the Olympics. The goal of this year is to defend home court in Moncton in September. So it's going to be a bit of a learning process, right? As I said, I fully expect this roster to change week in and week out and to see different guys get different looks as we continue through the VNL. So if this team doesn't make the playoffs, that's okay, right? Just like back in 2023 when this team went 3-9 at the VNL and then ended up qualifying for the Olympics at the last chance qualifier. It's all about the maturation process, but I have full confidence this team can get it done in 2026. As I said, I think this is one of the most talented teams Canada has ever had. It's definitely the deepest team Canada has ever had, and I think they're ready to prove that they're ready to compete with some of the best in the world in 2026. Now, if you want to follow along, and if you are Canadian, all VNL matches are streamed for free on cbcsports.ca. So if you want to watch live and you don't want to pay for VBTV, make sure to check it out over on CBC Sports. But while you're at that, make sure you subscribe here to Volleyball Source for all your updates of the VNL and the rest of ongoings in Canadian volleyball and international volleyball. Subscribe, hit that bell for the notifications. Come join us over on the Volleyball Source Discord. Hands down, the best online volleyball community in the world. We've got plenty of Canadians talking about Canadian ball at all time. And then follow me over on Twitch at That Volleyball Guy, where I'll be doing live watch-alongs for mostly Canadian games. I'm not going to say all of them, but you'll definitely have to be following along in the Discord because that is where I will be sharing those streams. But what do you guys think? Do you agree this is the deepest Team Canada ever? Let me know down below.